Okay, hi everyone. Um, Welcome to the One Thing.
Do you believe that people can be developed and poverty can be eliminated? Development of people is in their hands. It is not in the hands of other people.
Okay, hi everyone. Um, Welcome to the One Thing. This is a podcast where we're trying to answer something about the social sector and about social change in India, one question at a time. My name is Aishwarya,
I'm
and
Sarvesh. So the concept of this podcast is that there is a lot of conversation, there's a lot of content out there in the world, but in the civil sector, it's not simplified. When we look at the platforms like in the, websites, we tend to find reports, we tend to find very formalized jargon. So there's no one to simplify it down.
so we're trying to understand what the journey of the social sector has been in these last 77 years, what's really been our contribution to India's growth. And to do that, we have Dr. Patra with us. So I just have a very short list of about Dr. Patra's work. You are a qualified chartered accountant. You are a PhD in commerce. You've been a director at various companies and social enterprises and organizations. You regularly give workshops, and if the internet is right, you've given over 200 workshops till date. You teach, you write, you serve on the boards of various committees and organizations. So, could you tell us what made you start your career in the social sector? And if, when you look back, is there some defining moment that made you want to stick to it?
Yeah, so I started I came into the sector by accident, you know, because when I completed my CA way back in '91, before you were born.
Yeah.
So that time I got a job in a corporate which I didn't want to take. Then I thought I'll do some audit firm. I set up my own audit firm, which I did, and I couldn't get any clients because I was very young, and I don't know whether people generally have a trust issue with young people, and they thought whether I'd be able to deal with their complex income tax or other issues properly, or audit issues. So what happened was, I was in crossroads of life, and that time there were some people who approached me and said, "Would you like to give 3 years of your life to an NGO?" I never heard about what's an NGO. I said, "Okay, fine. What I have to do?" And they said, "You have to come and manage the finances and all that." So that's how I came in with a commitment of 3 years into this job. I realized that it's more complex than I thought, because in an industry, in a corporate, things are very well defined and captured, because the bottom line is profit. Whereas in a social sector, it's more complex than that, because we're dealing with human beings, and there are emotions and processes, and there are much more. Society is so complex. But I stuck to my own domain of accounting and reporting and so on. Then one of my colleagues came and said that, asked me a question. He said, "Do you believe that people can be developed and poverty can be eliminated?" I never even thought about that question. I said, "I don't know." He said, "If you don't believe, you have no business to be in this sector." And then I thought that I need to change something. So what I did was I started traveling into the fields and into the villages, into tribal areas, and really interacted with people, and that gave me the perspective. And what it is that that's happening on the ground. And once I started traveling, going around, meeting people, engaging with communities, I realized what are the real issues are, and that changed my perspective, brought me back into something which is very close to my heart, and I developed a passion for it, and that's how I started and continued. I never went back.
If I may ask you something, as the resident youth here, today a lot of kids are surviving in a very chaotic economy. Everyone's running towards having a job, having money. So in your story, you said you landed here by accident, by stayed here because of passion, right? So how do we today, someone who wants to make a change, an individual who wants to make a change, come into this sector, or what would you suggest someone to do?
I'm a bit old fashioned in that. So I don't think that people should come to an NGO for career. They should come here if you have a passion to work with people, and it's tough. Career comes second. And when I joined the sector, many of my friends, they said, what is this NGO and what kind of career it has. I also didn't know what kind of a career it would offer. But I just thought that very interesting to engage with the communities and be with people and do something meaningful in life. And that's how I came in. And much later on, all this career thing came in. And a lot of people also got attracted from various other sectors and started coming.
You said something very interesting that when you started out, you hadn't asked yourself, these questions. And I think even today, like when I speak to my friends or I speak to some family member, they, first of all, I don't think the understanding of what the social sector is or a non-profit does is still very, common knowledge right now. As soon as you set outside this close circle, a family member asked me, so you could have, taken up a job in a corporate and volunteered with your money. The understanding of why make a career there is not very prevalent. So how would you define in your own understanding, what is the social sector? What is a non-profit? And do you think that our role has changed?
If you look back, of course, I was also not born then when India got independent. But if you look at or read the history, when India became independent, the issues were massive. And I don't think it was even possible for one government to reach out to every nook and corner and be available and solve the issues that are there. So that time, some of the voluntary organizations, some people voluntarily got together, and this is how the voluntary sector started. And primarily, the issue was how do we work alongside the government and provide kind of a charity. So that's how we all started, charity. Charity and charity and charity. However, when 70s started, then people started thinking that, well, how long you can do charity? You just can't keep feeding people all the time or respond to something or the other. So from charity, then the thought came was how to empower, bring awareness in. Because ultimately the development of people is in their hands. It is not in the hands of other people. So the whole issue of building capacity, making people aware, making them aware about their entitlements, what they can get, and all that became important. So then NGOs started becoming like catalysts. They became like enablers. So that is how the whole shift has happened. Alongside what happened also is that the society started becoming more and more complex. Right now, as we speak, the issue of mental health, which was never recognized, has become a major issue. So the society is also getting complex, getting more and more difficult. So the new issues have to be dealt with. So the NGOs, civil society also needs to adapt and change to respond along with the government and other players to respond to such situations.
So have you seen that shift in society where maybe people have started caring less, or do you feel that kids and the youth has become more aware and started taking more action?
See, giving, of course, people are always wanting to give, but where they want to give. So fundamentally, we are very religious people. Okay. So for religious causes, if we give, then we expect that no questions asked, just go and give. The moment we give for social causes, we look for what's going to happen to that money, and that's where accountability comes in. It becomes a very, very critical, and it's becoming a major issue now as we think about accountability. What's happening to the money that is going, and is it being utilized for the right purposes? And those questions are being asked more and more.
You're right. We think twice. We start thinking about where is our money going. And I've seen that you take any non-profit organization, the finance team there is sort of a unit of its own, right? One never goes to them for like stories or insights. In the annual report, having their numbers is like a formality at the end of the report. At the same time, I know that as a grassroots non-profit, we're all about obsessing over this social challenge to solve, right? And sometimes we tend to think of money as something that's coming in the way of it and sort of taking you away from the mission. I see your work as trying to simplify this world of finance for the sector. So I want to know, do you think that there is a need for us to better understand this? And maybe not just as non-profits, but as supporting partners as well. And then do you think that going beyond transparency and accountability, do you think when it comes to financial planning, strategy, even fundraising, we need to build a better understanding of what this means to us?
I always think that the real story is in the books, and nobody reads the story. Many times what happens is that the books and records, they don't speak for themselves. Therefore, an external person is needed. And the financial finance department has to play a supportive role in the whole process. Therefore, understanding the whole vision is not only the program people but also the finance people.
So we've seen COVID, and during COVID, we saw that India's demat accounts tripled in numbers. The stock market had all of a sudden new players coming in. And then we see 2019-ish when the finance minister talks about the social stock exchange. And there comes in a new angle where the things that you talked about, right? Transparency becoming more visual, but through a government medium being regulated. So what is your opinion about the social stock exchange as maybe helping small scale NGOs also coming up to a different level of getting ownership and also creating transparency?
See, one of the things that the sector has not come to terms yet is about adopting new ways of working, new technologies, and new processes. So all the time, there is always that narrative to say that we work in rural areas where there is no internet, there is no this, no that. But how long? We really need to upgrade and come to different ways of working. So social stock exchange, of course, is not the only way, but one important way to work. And Aishwarya, you talked about professionalism. Right? Now that is something that the NGOs have to develop. So a lot of thought needs to be given in terms of how do we adapt to a social stock exchange, for example. It's a brilliant piece of work, so that if for nothing else, even if the NGOs are not able to raise funds, at least they would equip themselves better.
That's very true.
Because their systems will become better if they have to qualify to be on the social stock exchange platform. So NGOs have to be equipped and developed to take the advantage of such opportunities that are coming their way. But also we should realize that the NGOs have a very difficult job. One is in terms of what they do. The other is also to have enough resources to equip the team. Because NGO sustainability is another Pandora's box, will not even go there because it's very complex. Because NGOs basically survive on donations, grants, or more or less other people's money, what they have given or provided. Now, more and more foundations and others, they have very clear deliverables, and very little comes for institutional development. So NGOs struggle how to pay good salaries, how to take care of the staff. These are some of the challenges that NGOs are facing, and it's becoming more and more acute as times go by. Nobody is willing to give them institutional grants so that you develop an institution. And so, this can be done? There are no straight answers, of course, but I think if there are collaborations, there are many ways in which there are various platforms which are getting created, networks that are there. If small NGOs hook up to a particular network and be in that system, then probably their bandwidth can be increased for partners within that network. So as an umbrella body, there's a lot that can be done. How do we build their capacity? How do we equip them better so that it's a win-win situation?
So I mean, not just you. So I would ask both of you, as someone who's on the precipice of choosing a career or moving forward, and someone who's in the middle of a career process, and someone who's already reached a peak, right? So I want to understand that NGOs have always had certain image, right? When I was growing up in the early 2000s, it was like NGOs are like sanstha. That image was always there. So is this also part of the reason why when people and donors look at us, they don't want to institutionalize because they still feel that Indian NGOs are at that level only? Is there maybe a structural thing or maybe a cultural shift that needs to take place?
See, bad news makes news. Good news hardly makes news.
Yeah.
Right. So I would not buy that idea at all that all NGOs are bad. Many of the NGOs are doing excellent work, very selflessly, serving at the grassroots and all that. Now, however, there are also market forces. The ecosystem is itself changing. Now, NGOs are always in the threshold of change. The more they resist to change, the more difficult it will be to remain relevant. See, all of us have to remain relevant, right? In our own workspaces, in our personal spaces, and so on. The day we lose our relevance, we become redundant. And that's the same thing with the NGOs. So today what's happening? Some of the classical old style NGOs are probably dying or getting eliminated. But new NGOs are coming in who have better system processes and so on. Some of the people who have left their very good corporate careers are coming in and taking over and probably doing a great job in that. So I think the whole issue is, how do we learn from each other and develop and grow, and also respond to the changing societal realities in a more relevant, effective way. That would be the fundamental to for NGO survival or even relevance. But at the same time, to be fair, with the less resources and with all the challenges on the ground and so on, they do a very good job, in terms of. So wherever there is a natural calamity, the first people to reach have been the NGOs in the remotest part of the country. Then they would coordinate with the government, with other actors, and probably bring in resources and so on.
So I think another important stakeholder that's now coming up in our conversation is the government. And not everybody gets the chance to closely work with the government, but you've been a part of the planning commission in around 2005. So what do you think of the regulatory landscape in India now for nonprofits, and do you have any opinion on how it should evolve in the future?
See, I would just say this: we have to move out of an environment of mistrust, and we have to move into a trustful environment from all sides. NGOs should be able to trust the government, government should be able to trust the NGOs, and the private sector should be able to also trust. Trust has to come in, and so that at least there is good and close NGOs who have a well-intended NGOs, they are able to at least perform, and they take advantage of all that is happening, and government also benefits out of it. You see, we have a welfare state, right? Which means that education and health, state subjects. State has the responsibility. Government has to take that on. The civil society is not a government, but they can always facilitate. They can always be a supportive player in implementing some of these projects. That is very important, that there is that kind of a functional relationship happens.
So, if I may ask, civil society is always referred to as the fifth pillar of our country, right? Now, how do we break that mistrust amongst the public, and how do we engage with them more so that they start to recognize the fifth pillar? They start to also, value it in such a way like we value journalism in this country, right?
Fundamentally, I believe that those who come into the sector should come with the intent to give, and maybe in return receive something, but first give, right? But many, or not many, some people now, because there's a career now, so people come to receive and then probably to give also. It's not giving. But I think it's important. I was chairing a mega international NGO in India. So in one of the meetings, I said that it looks like everybody is telling the other person to give. Now I asked one guy, one of the top celebrities of the country in Bollywood. I said, how much you have given? We are always telling others to give in a lighter vein. He was a bit zapped because he has his own foundation, but he doesn't give here. But he's giving, telling others to give. I said, this is not going to work. I always believe that if I am not the first one to give, I don't have any right to ask somebody else to give. And that is probably the biggest problem. We're always looking at somebody else's pocket. So all our fundraisers, unfortunately, I always tell them that you're not becoming ethical. How can we become ethical in terms of communicating the real stories? There are a lot of real stories of change. We don't need to invent. So how can we capture the real issues, real changes, and even communicate? And that itself will become, and a life change itself is a very powerful story.
You're right, sir. So, like, I still remember when I was a kid, I used to watch Satyam Vajayate. And that's when you hear Amir Khan first discussing the stories and then actually making a change, maybe trying to connect people and trying to do that. I believe that's the right way, right? First take the step, then ask others to follow you. So, yeah.
So in an organization, it's an organization called Medha. There are 3-4 core values, and one of the values is collaboration. But collaboration is defined in a very interesting way. It says give more than you get, And internally, we would always argue that that's not collaboration. How is giving more than you get collaboration? But I think that's something you can elaborate more on as well. And you mentioned earlier as well, collaboration seems to be the solution to many problems that plague us. How do you think we can actually explore its power more? Maybe what role can organizations like OneStage play here?
So collaboration, right? Rightly you said. What I bring to the table, not what I get, what piece I get out of the cake. Unfortunately, many of the collaborations fail because they come with the wrong intent. So when I come to collaborate, I must ask myself or my organization what I'm bringing to the table. So years ago, we had a program called PACS, Poorest Area Civil Society Program. So 7 poorest states of the country were identified. 100 NGOs would be funded for a period of 5 years. So we brought in a consortium where we were the organization that I was heading. We were part of that consortium. We brought in all the financial management skills onto the table. Then there was a Dalit organization who brought in their skill sets. Then there was another organization who brought in their management skill set. So we all pulled it together, and that's how it was a 5-year project, and so many interesting, life-changing stories that were there. Now, I believe when you talk about equity, it's not about any pyramid. It's about a circle. That is the ideal way to work. So how do we dismantle the pyramid and make it into a circle where everybody has a right on the table? Equity means making human beings human, more human, and that's what that's how the society has to think. It's not that because I'm, so I will form a, so I got more money, so I form a big foundation, then I start funding and it becomes a commercialized activity. So it has to become very internal. There has been change within, which would probably give an expression that we treat people with equity. Equality, ideally it should, but in this world, so many complexities. Even if we have achieved equity, that itself is much more than one can expect.
There's one thing that you've said in one of your talks that talks about humility, which I think is important perhaps in collaboration. You've said that, and perhaps you've quoted that the interesting thing about humility is that the moment you realize you have it, you've lost it, right? And as non-profits, we are the horizon of these questions around humanity, right? We talk about these values. We also struggle with how do we embody these values day in and day out as employees on the ground, on not just the ground, but in the offices, right? Do you think that we could do with more humility in the sector in general? And not just on about, non-profits, but maybe supporting partners, any other kind of stakeholder as well. Maybe sometimes even us ourselves, because we think that, oh, हम तो काम कर रहे हैं, अच्छा काम कर रहे हैं, and इसको नहीं आता.
See, pride is very subtle. It can come, unless you guard your heart, it will come very subtle way. So when we say, so the moment I say, I'm with all humility, say something, then somewhere that humility has become a pride.
Right.
So I think fundamentally, the call for every human being should be that how I can become a better human being and I can make others more human. I think that's where the call is. And also, how an organization becomes humble is how our ecosystem within which each of us work, how we exemplify the humility. Because human beings, by nature, we are wired as proud people. We are not wired as humble people. Now, humility has to be practiced. Pride need not be practiced. Arrogance need not be practiced. Anger need not be practiced. These are all natural to us. Humility is counter-cultural. So we have to create a counter-culture, and then only the ecosystem and the community will change accordingly.
So, if there's one thing that you could say to the emerging non-profits and funders as well, what would it be? What would you ask them to consider?
I would say that nobody can solve all problems in this world. We need to collaborate, and collaborate. And at the same time, we need to reflect within ourselves that how are we being able to bridge that gap, in what way. I think that's very fundamental, and probably it's very easy to judge, right? Oh, that organization is not doing well. No, they are not doing this. So basically, we become very cynical many times. We think that, or that time also we become very self-righteous. We think that we are doing the best. We are doing well. All the others are not doing well. So it's important that and also live a life that will send a message.
It's a pleasure. I think what you've said applies to anybody who's listening to this conversation as well. If they're interested in more conversations on social change, on social action, or what does this sector really do, I think it gives them a great message as well.
And I think more than I thought I'd be educated by this podcast, but I think I'm more inspired today.
We have a request. You have to look into the camera and you have to say to hit like, share, and subscribe to the YouTube channel of OneStage.
Hit like, subscribe.
Just say like, share, and subscribe to OneStage.
Okay, like, share, and subscribe to OneStage YouTube channel.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.